and no public comments are given on work sessions. Although this is live streamed and held in public, it is a board work session. I'm Chuck Brimbury, Director of Secondary Education. My cohort tonight in crime over there is Jay Peters, Director of Elementary Education. We'll be manning the post tonight. Mr. Trout sends his best. This is treatment week, and he continues to get great news, and that's wonderful. He wanted me to express he appreciates the kind emails, text, and prayers, and wishes he could be here tonight, but he will be back for our next board session. So appreciate that. Also want to take a minute before we get started tonight. Thank Beth Clark for all the setup. She works very, very hard to make sure this is in a first-class manner, does a great job. Cindy Gray, for all you do. I can't begin to tell you all the things that we know you do, but thank you for all your work. Yesterday was one of the best days for our mothers that are out there. I hope we had a wonderful Sunday. We had beautiful, beautiful weather, and it was a super nice weekend. For our board tonight, our first topic tonight is discussion of the 2022 bond. Next project updates, our CFO that we are thrilled with in Huntington, Valerie Moore and Terry Thornsbury are here tonight to discuss this, and if it takes shorter than 30, that's certainly okay, but question and answer and discussion tonight. So Terry and Valerie, thanks for being here tonight to discuss this.
All right, what about now? Good? Okay. Yes. All right, let's see if this swing works. So school board tonight, I want to update you on the next project for Huntington North. I know we've met quite a bit over the last probably 6 months or so, walking around the building, looking at different things. I'm going to focus on two projects primarily this evening. And first is the library. So we walked around the library, we looked at the library. The library has been reconfigured in the past at some point because it's not the same as it was when I was in there years ago. But it is very dated. It's mostly original. IT got added to this building at some point because in 1970 we didn't have anything but coax wire, and that was it. So IT takes up a good portion of this. What used to be the center, it's kind of shifted off to one side. But the idea for the library, as far as a next project, would be to renovate it and turn it into what's considered a digital cafe. And I have a few images that I put in the presentation to give you the idea and the feel for it. I started doing this on at a university level 20 plus years ago. So for high schools, it's around. It's just not everybody can afford to do it, but it gives you the opportunity to do different things with IT, heavy IT in the space, a lot of wireless capabilities. Just depends on if you actually, how much you bring in on the cafe side, how much you bring in on the digital side, and then tie everything together. So that is a potential project, and that space is around 13,000 square feet. So you could easily spend $3+ million in there to dress all this up, and furniture and everything else to make it into a digital cafe. Some of the discussions we've had were to potentially take down the walls that were added at some point as well, so you wouldn't have that barrier, to make it feel more open. Because if you go in there now, and I've been in there quite a bit for meetings, you're in a box with no windows, and it's very dated. So that is a potential project. As far as a substantial size project, I took out some of the smaller things because we've talked about floors, we've talked about restrooms, and I wanted to focus on two of the big projects. So the biggest one as far as cost and overall building would be ceilings, lighting, mechanical, and that's diffusers and return air, PA, and piping. So Rich isn't here this evening, but Rich wanted to make sure that if we put new ceilings in like we did in here, that we address pipe leaks and valve leaks and other things. So there used to be a good leak right over here. There used to be a good leak over here. That one over there actually during construction would create a puddle every day until we got it fixed. Because we don't want to put in a new ceiling like this and then have water stains and damage, 2 days later. So Rich walked us around the building and showed us areas that are the worst, and it's not hard to figure out when you walk around and look up and find the stains on the ceiling, and you can see where the leaks have been. He told us what areas they've replaced, and he told us what areas have yet to be replaced. So some of these pictures, as we walked around, it's been a few months. I think we walked in November or December, and we did a kind of a tour of the building, and I showed you a lot of this. So a mixture of tile over the years, new and old, cracked and damaged tile, water stains. The biggest thing is lighting. So these are the original light fixtures from 1970 in the building. Rich did tell me that instead of replacing fluorescent bulbs with fluorescent bulbs, they'll take the ballast out and upgrade to LED tubes, but you're still dealing with a 1970 light fixture. So if you walk around, you'll see some just don't work, and others have different color temperature bulbs in them. So you'll have a little blue and a little brown and a little yellow, and but this also uses a tremendous amount of electricity for the building. It always has, and the idea would be to upgrade to a ceiling just like this, except it would be 2x4 tile instead of 2x2 to reduce some cost. Lay in LED fixtures similar to what's up by the serving line. All new diffusers like these, so a nice clean look to them. Return grills allow the air up, and they're kind of an egg crate look to them. So, and we'd also get rid of what looks like a airport runway look down the hallways of endless lights that hang down below the ceiling. So it'd be a lot cleaner look. There's some return grill pictures there. And Rich explained to us in some cases that they added those where the pipes leak, so it's just easier to put a bucket there. So they can just catch it through the grate instead of replacing the ceiling tile. So he tells us the truth because he wants us to do a piping project. He doesn't care about the lights and ceilings as much as he does the piping project, but we just can't afford to do it all. What we're dealing with primarily is domestic water piping that we replaced in here and down the hallway. That's galvanized, and galvanized pipe over time gets pinholes in it and leaks. So every time you turn the water off or turn it back on, it'll leak somewhere else because it'll loosen up corrosion on the inside of the pipe and start to leak more. So we do want to address that to some extent in the worst areas, and a lot of it is the piping that runs down the athletic hallway, so down to the arena. That's some of the worst area. Again, more pictures of the ceiling and the condition it's in. I've told this story to you guys a few times. So back in the day, in the summer, they would turn off the air conditioner in this building. They did the same at Salamone, and from what Rich says, most of the buildings. So what happened in here in Salamone, you can see it there as well, but here you can really see it is, so everything rusted. And then it had been painted again over top of the rust, and now that paint's peeling off of it. So here's a good picture of a diffuser that's been painted and rusty and painted, and it's just kind of an eyesore. So that's looking down the athletic hallway, especially without the lights on. You can really see just the mixture of tile, and there's old square can lights in there that don't work anymore. That's then at the field house and auditorium entrance. And we know that the majority of the public that comes into this building, they're down at that end. So most of us don't just stand there and look up unless you're an architect, and I do it all the time. But most people are looking at the floor or looking at the walls. But if you look up, this is what you see. And I'd really like to focus on this as the next project because we can affect nearly the entire building in this project. Whereas if you do the library, you're only doing the library. You're not doing the whole building because I'd like to get the biggest bang for our buck as far as square footage. Cost-wise, we have field verified nearly all of it. We've put costs together with contractors and suppliers and vendors. So right now, our estimate to do, if we did the entire building for everything that I have listed up there and the piping that Rich pointed out to us, we're at about $7 million. But that's just ceilings, yeah. So about $7 million. Valerie, though, is only allowing us to have about 4.8 million. So, but, right. So our plan would be, we'll design for 5.5, 6 million, and then have alternates so we can back out of that. Because if we get contractor that's hungry, as we're seeing more and more contractors show up for bidding, and we're hearing more and more contractors saying they need things to bid on, this is a project that's going to push us definitely to the end of 2025. Maybe beyond. It's still something we have to coordinate with Pat and how we're going to logistically move students around and make all this work and get it done. But my hope would be, we design beyond the budget and then be able to back out of it to get us, so we can get what we want with those alternates. So the idea would be maybe we don't do the ceilings and lights and PA for the library. Maybe we don't do the ceiling and lights and PA for the art space, because those eventually are going to be their own projects, to freshen those up and like we did here, do the whole thing. So we might cut some areas out. The field house has a totally different ceiling system and ceiling tile in it, so we don't. It's not in bad shape. We just wouldn't have to do that. But our focus would be those areas in which the public's in the most. The main hallways, do as many classrooms as we possibly can. Definitely back in athletics, locker rooms, everything. Get all that stuff updated and upgraded and make them nice as we can. So that's where we are. We are working through this as the next project on our end, just to get ahead, because as soon as we can get the green light from you guys when we can vote on this, we'll be ahead of schedule and be able to get going. Because as you guys know, it takes a while for us to get design, then it takes a month to bid, turn that around, get a contractor on board, and actually get working. It all takes time. So I know we've talked about these projects before, but any questions based on tonight? Because the numbers have gone up because we've figured out more and more than Rich really. So the piping alone, 1.5 million of it is just for the piping that Rich wants to do. So it all added up, and the number just increased because our budget was 4.8, and now we're at 7. But it's based on adding layers and layers of more to get everything done at one time. There's not much we can leave out. We could leave the PA system, but it's original to the building, and it's been wired into the control system for HVAC, and that's all getting replaced over the next 2 summers. So that can't last forever. So those are the kind of things we're dealing with, is we just keep making things work as best we can.
Is it fair to say that you would like to do as much above the ceiling as we can, so that you're not back up in there after we put new ceiling tiles and lighting in?
Right, and also, it's not listed there, but throughout this building, there's insulation laying on the ceiling that wasn't there originally, and code now doesn't allow that, so we want to get all that out. So there'll be dumpsters and dumpsters of just insulation that we don't want up there. Get that out, because this is a return air plenum, so you've got return air that runs through the whole building, and you don't want stuff up there. So that insulation needs to be thrown away and get rid of it when we tear everything out. So it would be taking out the grid and the ceiling tile for as much of the building as you possibly can.
So are you saying that you would start with the hallways, and then if you ran out of money, then you would start omitting classrooms?
We would design.
You cut it.
Yeah, Matt. We would design for all of it, but the coordination's the big piece to that. So throughout the school year, hallways could be done, but classroom's not the same case. And we've talked to Pat about, if we do 3 classrooms, give contractors 3 classrooms, where do we move those 3 classrooms? Or 6 classrooms, and where do we move those 6 classrooms? So it becomes a chess game throughout the school year to move students around so that you can get a classroom done. And we would hope a contractor could get 3 classrooms done maybe in a week, and then get out of the way and just shuffle kids around.
Just wondering, if you run out of money, though, what are you gonna omit?
Like I said,
Who's out?
it would probably be large spaces like the library. That's 12,000 square feet. And plus that's a very complicated ceiling system that's in there now. So we wouldn't put it back that same way. Art is another big space that we would just not do that. The first thing would be, the easy one would be not do the piping, but you're going to pay for that later, or you're going to be really upset when you don't do that athletic hallway and 2 months later it's stained and looks nasty. And so we want to keep the piping in there as much as possible. But there's areas that if we had to sacrifice, say for instance, second floor of auditorium, it's back of house stuff that you don't see, but those ceilings are destroyed up there for those people that go up there. But we're gonna have to piecemeal it and figure out how to get that down, like I said, to that maybe $5.5–6 million number budget, or our estimate wise, designed for that, and then once we get bids, get us down to where we're within budget, and that becomes the scope for the contractor.
So on the library, you talked about opening it up again. So are you talking half walls again, like it used to be, or are you talking glass, or?
If that was a project, there's a lot of different opportunities because the old stacks, the bookcases are there, and some of them have been dismantled. There's walls, then the lockers are against all of that. So you got to move all that stuff out of the way. And yeah, I don't think we would open it all up like it used to be, but maybe portions of it to make it feel more open, or glass or windows up high so that you don't feel like you're in a box.
Terry, summarizing, I guess, for our public and for the board, facts will start on construction as soon as school's out, completed before the kids get back in the fall.
Right.
Phase 1 of science, which would be 5 classrooms, will be this summer.
Correct.
And then after the kids gets back, phase 2 of science, another 5 rooms to be completed in November-ish.
Correct.
Major mechanical is going on as we speak, but the bigger part with the crane coming in for the penthouse this summer will take place June and July, correct?
Correct.
With obviously some, I'm glad to see all the parts are in, and so now it's about see what we find when we're in there. The second penthouse would be next summer, correct?
Correct.
A year from now. And after contingency fees, and you're consistently under budget, knock on wood, you've done a wonderful job, but minus contingency fees that we save, minus coming in under budget, those projects, and then what you're telling to our board and our public is that if we get to the lights hallway, if that's the direction that this board went, summarizing that theoretically would close out the 22 bond minus all the savings, which might be able to do some smaller projects at the end, whether it be floors or things like that, correct?
Correct. That's the idea, that you would be left with enough to tackle some of the smaller things. And it could be, like we talked about jokingly, once you put new lights in, you're going to want to paint some walls and
Sure.
clean. So that money, that residual money, could be used for things like that.
End of it. But
Absolutely.
theoretically, this would be the last major project, if you did piping, ceilings, and lights, of the 22 bond, and then it's contingency savings and wrapping up at the end, correct?
Correct. We're looking for one last big project.
So just so I understand how this would work out, you would have them bid on it, but then we might just eliminate some of the things. Would the bid stay the same? We said, okay, they came in at this number, we can't afford that, we need to pare this back.
Right.
Change.
Right. So what we'll do, Tim, is we'll put together a design that maybe is $6 million. What we're going to project as $6 million, but we'll put in 3 or 4 deduct alternates, so that if we take area A out, which is the library, then that reduces the cost by this much. So we get down to budget, because we don't want to design and not have it come in under budget, and then we don't have enough time to do anything.
Okay.
So we'll over design and then back it out.
But let's say we come in after contingencies and everything, $1 million short doing the full project. What's our general obligation bond situation?
So What's, the question I had is what's our GOB situation? Because I know we have other needs and things we're looking at throughout the corporation.
You're right. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, it's
Okay,
whether
great.
it's
Yeah.
out there.
So where we're at, so there's, and as Terry mentioned, we have, a budget to follow within the 2022 first mortgage bonds that we issued, and then there are 2023 allocations, but they're not for the scope of this building. So we're, operating within what we advertised and being transparent with what we're doing with those allocations. So there's a lot of moving parts to this, as Terry mentioned. The good thing is that we have invested the money, the proceeds of the 2022 bond wisely, and we do have to work within our deadlines to spend out this money, being transparent with and fiduciary responsible with the allocations. So with that being said, depending on the timeline, we might have to get to a spot where we would have to pay those back because there's a limit as to how much money that we can earn off of the interest of the bonds. So again, bringing this to light because of there's, delays in receiving the equipment. We're not the only school to be in this position right now. And all that to say that the market has been really good in terms and really strong in terms of rate of return on our investment. So there's going to be more information forthcoming. I'm in the research stage of where we're at with those limits and those thresholds. So I'll circle back with more information. But in terms of GOB, if we need to come back and circle back later, that's another piece I'll look into as well, because there are, as Terry mentioned, it's hard to get into the lighting if we don't have the funding for the piping behind it, and it
Sure.
makes things difficult.
Okay.
But our last GOB was for Salamone, right? That's the other
Correct.
GOB that we did?
Correct.
Yeah, and that's specifically to that specific facility.
Exactly.
Other questions for Terry, Valerie, and I appreciate both of your expertise on this, and it's exciting, busy though, exciting busy. There's a lot going on in this high school, and I know it seemed like early on, Terry, it was hard, we didn't have the supplies, some of the things weren't coming in like all over the country, but it is kind of exciting right now with the amount of things that are happening simultaneously here. So I appreciate all your expertise and leadership on this. Are there any other questions for Terry or Valerie before Kevin?
Terry, when we decide how we want to go on this, what's the timeline?
As fast as we can. That's why we're working ahead on ceilings because it's the biggest.
Okay.
Our hope would be to finish up design July or August, put it out to bid as soon as we can after that, and then have a contractor on board late summer, early fall. But we're down to a year, less than a year and a half. And ceilings is a big project. It's just a lot to get done.
Is it a year project?
It's more than a year project. So we really have to nail down, and a lot of it's coordination, like I said, with classrooms. So how many kids can we move? How many students can we move at one time? Shuffle them around, put it on a schedule, and then also talk to some contractors that are already here in the building, know the building, and have them give us some input on, okay, if this was your project, talk us through this timeline to make sure it makes sense, constructability wise. Is this going to work? And I know they'll be open to help us because they'll want to bid it and make sure that, okay, we need every bit of December of 25 to get this done, or do they think they can get it done faster? It's gonna be crew size and availability of space. Hallways is easy. You can block off half the hallway and let students keep going on one side and work around it. But classrooms gets tricky. And we've already started that discussion with Pat, and we've got a long way to go to figure that out.
Does it make sense to hold off on the classrooms until we actually do a classroom space?
The thing is with classrooms, I don't know when you're going to do them all. There's so many. If you waited to do each classroom individually or a block of classrooms like we're doing science, you'll be replacing what you did 20 years ago. You'll never get caught up.
Okay.
That's what we're afraid of. And we'd like to have consistency and a standard, so you have all the same light fixtures, you have all the same parts and pieces, so that you're not, having to, oh, well, that's brand A and this is brand C and that's brand D, and then you're back to where we are now, just a mixture of everything. So, good questions. I appreciate it.
Other questions from the board for Terry or Valerie?
Okay.
Score at home, Mr. Trout, that's 4 minutes earlier on the 30 minutes allotted sometime.
Looking forward to your proposals as soon as you can put them together.
Yeah, I think I'm meeting with you guys at the next 3 board meetings. So, lot to Salamone. We've got everything still going. So I'll be back. Thanks for putting me first. Whoever put me first, though. Yeah.
Thank you, Terry.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Mr. Peters, I believe you're up.
Okay, our next topic is student mental health programming, and it's a topic, board, that has come before us in our board meetings, and so we wanted to share out with you and our public what we're actually doing with our student mental health programming in the district. It's a pleasure to introduce to you Meg Friesen, our corporation nurse. Meg, if I can just brag on you just a little bit, you just finished up your degree as a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. And so excited about the skill and expertise that you bring each and every day, but obviously in this new area of degree work that you've done, we're really proud of you and thank you and appreciate all the work that you do. So talk to us about student mental health programming that we do in the district.
I think you have to. Nope.
Oh, it's a push like that. Okay, thanks. Okay, thank you for having me, and I challenge you to ask me as many questions as you asked your first presenter, okay? So my name's Meg. Like Jay said, I'm the corporation nurse, and I do think that sometimes when people think of nurse, they think of the physical health of our students, and so as I'm speaking this evening, I hope that when I say the word health, that you will think of the physical health of our students, but also the mental health, their emotional health, their social health, all of the different types of health that we see. And I also want to challenge you when you hear the word safety to be thinking about the physical safety of our buildings, of our students, but also the psychological safety when we're talking about bullying and kids being able to come into the school and feel safe. I want to keep those 2 words in mind. I also don't know how much you as board members are aware of what MTSS is, but it stands for multi-tiered systems of support. And so when I say tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, MTSS does address academics, it also does address behavior, and it also does address the emotional and social health of our students. So just keeping those in mind as I present. So if I was to boil everything that I'm going to say this evening down, I would say that healthy and safe kids can learn. And when our kids are not healthy and safe, when those basic needs are not met, that's when our teachers are working even harder, but we're getting lower results. And so that's where I want us to think of the health and safety of our kids. In my opinion, mental health is not going to be corrected, is not going to be more successful in not just Huntington, but in our country by creating more drugs and by having people sit with more professionals. And that's a scary thing for somebody to say that has just worked really, really hard to be one of those professionals. But I really, truly believe that mental health is a public health issue. And where we're really going to see a difference is if we treat it like a public health issue. I had an administrator say to me, Meg, I hear you. I love where your heart is, but we as a school cannot be everything to everyone. And I would argue that. I know that we cannot do comprehensive mental health for every child in our district, but I do think that we can be the center of everything when it comes to health. There is no one else that spends and pours as much time and energy into children as schools do. And some people would argue with me and they would say, well, parents, that's who it is. That's who pours as much time and energy. And that's true in some households, but it's not true in every household. And that's where schools come in. So I want you to think about historically how schools came to be and what we've come to provide. There was a time in the history that there was no transportation to schools. And then someone came up with the idea, like, we need to get these kids to school. We're gonna buy these huge yellow buses, and we're gonna pay people to drive them, and we're gonna get kids to school. And there were people at that point in time that said, this is crazy. This is a parent's responsibility. We don't need to transport kids to school. But right now, we have huge yellow buses. We have a whole director of transportation and over 50 employees that are part of that transportation department. There was always also a time, like in our history, where we didn't feed kids when they came to school. And people probably thought, that's also not our responsibility. They have homes, they have parents, they can pay for their food. But now we're in a place where we're not only providing breakfast and lunch to kids, but we're providing free breakfast to an entire district of students, and we help feed them during the summer. So as things are changing historically, we find ourselves in a new moment in time in a post-COVID era where things are changing. So when we look at mental health in our school district, we need to look at Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 interventions. So some of the Tier 1 interventions, and this is part of the document that you have in front of you, is we have partnered with community organizations. We brought Alive and Well into our schools, and they've taught coping skills to both 6th and 8th grade kids in both middle schools. And then we've also partnered with Youth Services Bureau, brought them into our 7th grade classrooms, and we've taught them suicide prevention within our 7th grade classrooms. And in the past 2 years, we have worked with the high school teachers, and we're looking to integrate health into the classroom so that kids can learn little bits of health that goes along with what they're learning in their science curricula, in their math curricula, and in their language arts. So I want to share some statistics with you and let this kind of sink in. So right now in our middle schools, 50% of students say that they are struggling with anxiety, and over 20% say that they're struggling with depression. Now, if I came to you and I said, Board, let me tell you something. We have 50% of our students have developed type 1 diabetes. I think there's, something going on. Everyone would pay attention. If I said 50% of our students in the middle school have a broken leg, you all would be like, we need to invest in more wheelchairs and more crutches for our students. But a lot of the things that we're seeing are things that we can't physically see. In the clinics, we see a lot of psychosomatic symptoms where we're seeing the kids come in for headaches and we're seeing the kids come in for stomach aches, but we don't always see what's going on. So again, I'll say 50% of students say that they are struggling with anxiety, and 20% say that they're struggling with depression. So you could say the majority of our students are struggling with anxiety, and almost a quarter of our students are struggling with depression. But there's only a small portion of those kids that actually need like a Tier 2 intervention. So this would be the school counselor or seeing a social worker within the school. And then even a smaller percentage of those students that need a Tier 3 intervention, and that would be going to a psychiatrist, having help with medication, or being seen at a psychiatric hospital. But what I want to argue is that a lot of these kids need a different kind of intervention. If we would supervise kids' screen time, if we would put limits, if we would put policies into place to remove cell phones during instructional time, if we would help students know that when they have a nutritious diet, if they're eating a meal with their family or having one-on-one attention from a supportive adult, they would feel better if they ate better, if they exercised, if they joined an after-school activity. This year, we have implemented a chance for teachers to do more after-school activities, and I would highlight Lincoln Elementary and what they have done this year to just blow up the amount of after-school and before-school activities. We have kids running to get into the building to be in marathon club, where they walk laps before school. And this kind of after-school and before-school activities are getting kids, like the culture of the school, the positive connections with adults, they are so excited. Or just telling kids, we want you to go outside and play. So all of these are things that we can do that are tier 1 interventions. We have the power to change policies within the school, and I know that you all play a big part at that. I want to educate parents about the importance of sleep, spending time together as a family, just basic ideas of mental and physical health out there to our students. And this is, again, the foundation of the education that we want to promote. So without this physical health education, without this mental health education, our kids are not going to be able to learn. Our kids who are not sleeping are not going to learn. Our kids who are having donuts and Monster for breakfast are not going to learn. Our kids who have spent the night in the midst of drama on their phone are not going to learn. So I'm here today to tell you that we are doing really amazing things in our school right now for mental health. But in the years to come, I hope to continue to come back to you and tell you more things that we're doing. But I want, as a board, for you to prioritize what mental health needs that we have in the classrooms and our school districts, and to understand that these mental health needs are going to make a big difference in the future lives of our children. And I would like, as a district and as a board, for us to be proactive and preventative when we're talking about mental health.
Thank you, Meg. And questions from the board or comments?
Yeah, I obviously, I appreciate this more than you know. Everything's funded, and funding issues are always the question when it comes to the board, and a lot of what you have listed in this shows the funding provided through grants and other ways. Since this is more of a focus, you anticipate more grant funding available, because we're going to need to consider obviously how we pay for the additional support. And then my secondary question was, is there a process to determine who gets tier 1 when they move to tier 2? You know, is there that group?
Yeah. So all of our schools have small groups of teachers and counselors, administrators that are MTSS teams. And so we're looking at the academic needs of the students. We're looking at the behavioral needs for the students. And sometimes those academic and behavioral needs are folded into needing mental, emotional, social help, and sometimes physical. You know, it's something that we've missed that we haven't seen. And I'm glad you brought up the funding, because I feel like, you know, as a board and as a district, we're pulled in so many different directions. There are so many different priorities. And obviously, I'm going to stand up here and tell you that the thing that I am most passionate about is the priority. But I do believe we've been able to do a lot with grant funding so far, and there is a lot of grant funding still out there. But I want to look at creative alternatives, whether it's working through Medicaid billing, if we can work with the health department. They've just received a greater amount of funding. And then we also have opioid dollars that are being managed by the Huntington Community Foundation. So I want to be really creative when we're talking about funding streams. Even if the school was able to be part of the funding stream, I would be okay with that, but I don't want to rely, you know, put all your eggs in one basket. So I think we need to be smart and diversify that.
Well, and I guess that's what I'm wondering, what additional buckets would we have abilities to use? Maybe not even things that the board necessarily has a lot of say in, because this is really important. But since it is a focus, I could see there being possibilities to get more funding, you know, than normal, than we're used to, and that's, yeah. Who does that? So is that your job? Is that?
Sure. I would love that to be my job. No, I do. Like, I think looking for grants and finding grant opportunities is a huge, you know, and it's not just our district. I mean, this is all over the state and all over the country. Like, after COVID, we're just like now kind of emerging to a place where people are feeling a little bit more safe. But our students, we don't even understand like what they've been through, you know, so far. So I think there's a lot of funding that's out there, and the funding will continue. And that's the kind of thing that jumpstarts us as a corporation to say, okay, this is where our most important needs are, and then we can try to allocate funding in that way.
Thank you.
Meg, why don't you share about your school liaison grant that you had, and when you talked about what took place at Lincoln, what you shared with the buildings to say, hey, there's some monies available, be creative and maybe share a little bit.
Yeah. So with the school liaison grant, we were basically charged with saying, what did we lose during COVID? And we lost all sorts of things. And we lost like weird things like kids couldn't use drinking fountains, you know, just all sorts of different things. But one of the things that we lost is just that extracurricular time with teachers, when teachers can just kind of let their hair down and have fun with the kids and not worry about testing, not worry about any sort of outcomes. And so I threw that out to teachers across the district, and I said, if you've ever wanted to do a club or do something fun with kids, and like I said, Lincoln really stepped up and had multiple clubs before school and multiple clubs after school. They had a board game club, a Spanish club, a cheerleading club, a volleyball club, a marathon club, like I said, where the kids would come and walk. But other schools came up. The high school had a photography club that they started. Crestview had a dissection club where kids could come after school and dissect different things. So it was like, you know, sporty, it was science, it was art, it was all sorts of different things. But when teachers stay after school, that's a huge dedication. And they are getting reimbursed for their time, but not fully for everything that they put into that. So you have to really love kids and love spending time. And I know part of our strategic plan, there is a line in there that, you know, we're looking to get more and more kids staying after school. And if I could, you know, wave a magic wand and say, what is it that would get you excited to stay after school? So you like don't run out at 2:30 from the high school that you're like, oh, I'm staying for this club, I'm staying to do this. Those are the kind of kids that want to attend school, that want to come here, that are excited about coming to school. So I want to increase that and keep that going. And I think that's kind of a creative thing because when people think of mental health, they're not right away thinking after school activities. But connection is what is going to keep our kids safe and healthy, that connection.
So how do you get the shy kid that doesn't want to be a part of that? I mean, deep down they do, but they don't. And they shy away. They'd rather just go home than, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think part of it is really finding out what is it that like gets that kid excited. Because if it's reading, awesome, then we'll have a reading club. I was sharing with the kids, I was doing a presentation on connection, and I said, there's actually a thing now where you can be a part of a book club where no one talks. You just go to a coffee shop and you read your book, but you know everyone is there. My sister's like a super big introvert, and that's like her new thing. So I do think that there's things for every kid, and I think when we saw the diversity of what the teachers brought, but board game clubs, you know, just different kinds of things that I would hope that the quiet kids also, that we could draw them into it. But I think that's important, asking all of the kids. So we're not just asking the kids that always have a voice, but we're asking every single kid. And then we're saying, okay, we have 3 kids that really want to do this euchre club. Is there any teacher that knows how to play euchre? And then pair those kids up together. That's what I would hope, that we would be able to have every kid be able to say what they're interested in.
Yeah, my wife gave an example the other day. There was some bashful girl on the playground, and she wanted to play volleyball. And so she asked her if she wanted to bump the ball back and forth. And she said nobody wanted to play with her. And so my wife bumped the ball back and forth, and then next thing you know, another girl showed up because that looked fun. And next thing you know, she's got a half dozen girls out there bumping the ball, and my wife steps away. And so, I mean, it's a good example.
And our kids don't, like, everybody doesn't need 10 friends. Like, you need one friend. You know, you have one person to bump that volleyball back and forth with. And I think the more after-school activities and before-school activities and just even during-school activities, like the high school has a lot of during-school activities, these are the reasons that the kids are going to get excited for school. And then they will also learn while they're here also.
So on the assessing, I've always heard about the assessing and the different levels, the MTS. So what is the give
So-
examples of what each level.
Yeah, so tier 1 would be we want to get this out to every child. So for me, like my passion in tier 1 is that I want every child to understand the difference between, oh, I'm kind of anxious during this test, and like that's good. That's good anxiety. Like that's going to push us. We're going to be more productive because we're feeling that anxiety. It's going to make us study harder. So that's different than I'm so anxious I can't leave the clinic. I'm so anxious I can't leave my parents' car in order to get into the school. So understanding the difference between what is anxiety, okay, and clinical anxiety. And if you're feeling this over here, that we want you to know that this is a safe place and you have adults to talk about. Same kind of thing with depression. Like everybody has bad days, but what does it look like when it crosses over to like a clinical nature? Or if you're starting to have like intrusive thoughts, here are the safe adults in your school that you're going to talk to. So that's like a tier 1. We just want everybody to understand what is mental health, what are coping skills. Then tier 2 is if you do see those kids that are like, I'm seeing a difference in grades, I'm seeing a difference in like who they're not talking to as many people, that the school counselor can be like that first person that's there. But if we had more school counselors in the middle schools or a school social worker that is trained like with a master's degree that can be a therapist, then that child can see somebody within the school. And then our tier 3 is when we're like, you know what, this is getting too big for us to handle as a school. Like they've seen the counselor, they've spent time with the nurse, like all of these different people are helping. Then we can be the center of referring kids and saying, you know, to parents, here is a list of all the different people. You know, you've got Bowen, but you also have a whole bunch of different places that you can go to get that help. And then kind of at the top of tier 3 would be inpatient psychiatric help. And then working with parents and hospitals to bring those kids back in and make sure that we're doing that in the safest way possible. So those are kind of how the tiers would work, like in a mental health capacity.
So I have a couple questions about you had mentioned early on, screen time and cell phones. Rumor has it amongst the high schoolers that next year they cannot have cell phones
Well,
in the room, but I have not verified that.
Okay. I don't.
Indiana has passed a bill. Mr. McLaughlin, you can chime in, but we're working through what that policy means for our kids. And Mr. Trout met with the administrators, but we will roll that out this summer and communicate to all. But Indiana law has been very clear on that it has to be for an academic purpose. I'm paraphrasing there, Mr. McLaughlin, but I believe that to be true. Yes. And so we're looking at what that means for Huntington schools, and we will bring that to you this summer. But I'm a big component of the more the kids are talking to each other, the more the kids are talking to us. We're not wrong on this. An intentional positive school culture communicates all day long in a positive manner and reaches out where kids trust adults and trust each other and trust their resources to a point where when kids are in need, we know first. And if we don't know first, somebody then will communicate on their behalf to us. And so the lady sitting right here, I say we now, I've been here long enough, I can say we. We are exceptionally blessed to have the counselors, an intentional school culture, to have Meg, to have the nurses, and to have Bowen and the resources that are in this. But every district is asking, we need more because the statistics are scary. The 50% is a scary number to all schools in America, and it's not just Huntington. I'm telling this board, and I tell, as we focus on our kids, you'll hear me pushing the academics hard, but you will hear Mr. Trout, Mr. Peters, and I, and our administrators trying to prioritize resources to make sure our kids are healthy. And Meg described it very, very well. And it's a balancing act. Do you have enough? Well, I can tell you the continuous improvement model in Huntington is we have this discussion every week in leadership of do we have enough and can we afford more? And if we don't have enough, how do we find more? And so we're blessed here with the people we have. I'm telling you, my past experience does not have the expertise that are at Huntington schools for our kids. But I'll tell you what she's telling you is real, and coming to you with How do we get more resources for these kids will be a ongoing, continuous improvement. It won't stop because every school is experiencing this.
So just to go to the anxiety question or situation, this thing is just such a distraction. I'm distracted by it because I have a son playing in a golf match right now. And
Yeah.
my wife to text me updates, and it's just not great in terms of focus and attention span and everything. And I also think I'm one who likes to read an actual book, not read the book on here. And one of my sons is reading Macbeth, and I don't think there's a book. I think it's on here, and we've given the device to the kids. But what are the possible benefits of the no cell phones in the classroom? Maybe moving to reading some physical books instead of doing it on the laptop.
Yeah, I think first that you bring up a really good point that us as adults need to look in the mirror and we need to say, wow, like I feel like I always have this, on me. And so when we as parents are doing better at putting this away at the dinner table or putting it away when we're having a face-to-face meeting with someone, turning it over or whatever it is that we need to do, our kids are watching us. And so they see, that kind of role modeling. So, I would, it's a huge struggle. I have 4 kids. It's a huge struggle in our house, and it's a constant conversation. My kids will tell you that I'm always talking about it. But I do think that I think there is an argument for keeping the phones off during instructional time. And I think that will be something that we discuss a lot during the summer. But I also think that the phones are not going away. And so we also, I think, have the responsibility as parents and as a district to say, how do you live life with this? Because you're going to have it when you're not around your parents or not around supervision. You're going to have it when you go to college or, whatever you do next. So we need to also teach healthy habits with it. So there's kind of that push where I'm like, let's throw all the cell phones away. And at the same time, the reality of they're not going away. But I do think it's really hard to do a lot of your work on a computer, but I also think that this is like kind of the way of the future too. So again, we have to balance with, I love to curl up with a good book. Like I wouldn't be able to read a book on the screens, but some of these kids have grown up reading a book on the screens and wouldn't even, how do I hold this book? So, that kind of balance I think will be a big part of our summer conversation. How do we balance that?
How do we have the kids here during the instructional time and then they go home, and you mentioned examples, kids having the phone on at 1 a.m. and some social disaster on Instagram or something that then ruins their sleep and they don't focus the next day. Like how do we educate parents on responsibilities for that? Because there's just a lot of parents that aren't even monitoring it. But then on the other hand, there's parents that have Life 360 and their poor kid can't go anywhere without knowing exactly where they are 100% of the time.
There's been a lot of cool things that I found at other schools where they'll have parent nights. And I know people are like, parents don't come to parent nights, but they have parent nights. And then they also stream it so that people can watch it. And they also have recording. So you could have like a time where parents come in and you talk about the importance of sleep. I'm passing around a survey, and it's just really interesting to look at, where you can see that the percentage of kids that have 6 or less hours of sleep that are walking into our middle schools, I would say, man, those teachers having to try to teach someone who's been on less than 6 hours of sleep, I'm not saying it's impossible, but you have to really work to get their attention if they've had less than 6 hours of sleep. So I think that a big part of this is partnering with parents, that we absolutely can't do this alone, but educating parents on the dangers of screen time, how that links to our mental health, tons of research out there, and then also how do we get our kids to go to sleep at a decent time. Yeah.
And the trying to keep on schedule here with future things. Do we have any final comments for Meg? And Meg, you've done a wonderful job. We knew you would. Any other comments for Meg?
I didn't hear anything about a school board club, so I'm pretty sure Mr. Wall was part of it when he was in school.
What'd you say? School board club?
Yeah.
Like future school board members, like if you want to learn how to be a school board member when you grow up, come and join this club.
Social media support group.
You can sit for hours and read pieces of paper. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Thank you very much, Mech.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here.
That'd be a good topic for students and parents, appropriate social media activities and.
All right. Let's see. Topic number 3, I believe we have Principal Drummond here and the Honorable Joe Wiley. If you guys want to come up, they'll be telling us a little bit about Area 18, what that is, and some things for question and answer tonight. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us. Good evening. All right, well, tonight we are going to talk about our participation in Area 18, which is a career and technical education cooperative, and then what our part is in that, and then what our future could look like. So first, some background. The state of Indiana is divided into 52 career and technical education districts. So if you look at that map, the big hot pink one kind of on the right-hand side, that's Area 18, which is what we're currently a part of. There we go. Okay. So Area 18 is comprised of 9 high schools located within the 5-county region of Adams, Blackford, Huntington, Jay, and Wells counties. Geographically, Area 18 is the largest CT cooperative in the state. And this map is going to show you kind of the drive time and just how spread out Area 18 is. There we go. Okay, so that kind of shows where those 9 high schools are located. You'll notice that Huntington North, we are the furthest northern school in Area 18. We're about 30 minutes from Norwell, which is our closest neighbor, which feeds into I know sometimes the boards have asked me in the past, like, do we send or receive students to other high schools? We currently don't because we're just too far away. These are the schools that are within our cooperative that we would send to, but we go to Heartland, which is about 25 minutes, and that's a tough sell for kids. So to go 30 minutes is even further. And when you think about just the sheer to go to Jay County from here, I mean, logistically, that's just not something that they would send up here or we would send down there. So there are some pros to being in it. See, I'm so sorry, it's skipping. Maybe not. Okay, so our role within the cooperative, we are the largest high school by enrollment. For next academic year, we offer 19 career and tech ed pathways on our own for students to explore their future and different career options. And as I explained, we don't send or receive currently just due to district, the distance, and just some relationships that have been established for years between the other schools. Okay. So some of the pros of being within Area 18, some of the services they provide for us. They submit our Form 30A data to the state. So we pull that as a school, and then they actually turn that in to the state of Indiana. Also, to be eligible for federal Perkins Grant funding, you have to complete a comprehensive local needs assessment. So that's something that the cooperative does for us. So that's not anything that we have to do on our own. We participate in their CLNA, and then we are included in their basic Perkins Grant application. Some of the cons of being in the cooperative is that we don't have local control of the basic Perkins Grant allocations. So what the procedure looks like now is that Area 18 does the CLNA, they write the grant application, they are allocated the money from the state, and then they decide which school gets which amount of funding. As we are the largest school in Area 18, we pay 26% of the director's salary. You happen to have a licensed CT director on staff. I'm actually licensed in that capacity. So we're paying somebody else to do something that I could actually do for us. And then also there's a loss of autonomy in applying for additional grants. So sometimes there are some prohibitors because we're part of Area 18, we have to go in with Area 18, which is great, but we're already the largest school, so there might be a tendency to focus on the schools who need more help, right? And just to show you the financial side of it, no. I'm so sorry. I'm clicking like a crazy person. One more. Can you click it? There it is. Okay, got it. All right, so I wanted to show you the financial side of this. So I looked at the last 4 years of our federal Perkins funding. You can see the first column is what Huntington received. The second column is what Area 18 was allocated from the state. And the third column shows you the percentage that we received. So I mentioned earlier that we pay 26% of the director's salary. That's tied to our enrollments. So 26% of the students in Area 18 are here at Huntington North. On average, over the last 4 years, we average about 20% of that allocation. So you're paying part of the director's salary, and then you're not getting your full allocation that you would be eligible for if you were your own CTE district. So it's kind of a double whammy in funding that we're losing for our students. So we're kind of at a crossroads. We've grown rapidly. We have some very solid programs in place currently. So there are some options. We can remain within Area 18, maintain the status quo. Our other option would be that we could choose to form our own CTE district. And that's a pretty straightforward process with the state. You would submit a letter in writing to the Area 18 Governing Board, which is comprised of the superintendents of those 9 school districts. We would negotiate our equipment, and then we would apply to the state to establish our own CTE district. If we were to do that over the next few months, we would be eligible for Perkins funding on our own starting in 25-26. So we would do our own CLNA, we would submit our own application, and then we would get our own funding. So that would be specifically for Huntington. We wouldn't have to share those dollars with anyone else. Okay, what questions do you have for me?
On the technical side of this, when Tiffany mentioned that it's submitted to the other directors, as she said, there's 9 corporations involved, and the contract, the agreement says you have to get a 2/3 affirmative vote from the other superintendents. So we would have to have 6 votes from the 9 schools to allow us to withdraw from the Area 18 Cooperative. And what we also have to give a 1-year notice in advance of our intention to withdraw. So part of that option B would be if you choose to withdraw from the cooperative and we apply for to be our own district, that does take a period of time to do that, and that recognition comes from the state, right? And so we would be required, if we want to do this for school year 25-26, we have to give notice basically by July 1st of this year, correct? So this needs to be decided. You can always do, if you stay in Area 18, you can do it down the road, but if we're going to try to do this for school year 25-26 and be our own cooperative district, we need to be giving that notice, basically a decision at the next meeting, at the February 28th meeting, if you choose to do that, so that the letter can be written, and then this administrative board meets monthly, and they have a meeting scheduled for June. So the letter would be submitted, they would vote to allow the withdrawal or not, and then, as Tiffany said, there'd be some further negotiations to do that. But from the economic standpoint, we believe it would be beneficial to HCCSC to be our own district, so we relieve that imbalance between paying 26% of the cost and only receiving 20% of the benefit.
But they could keep it.
I mean,
They could vote. They could say no. You're in.
yeah, they could. We would have to have that 2/3 majority for them to allow us to leave.
Because all this is controlled, it's not the Board of Education. Who is the controlling?
The Office of CTE falls under the Commission for Higher Education currently.
The Commission of Higher Education does this for the whole state, so they have rules that we have to follow. So yes, our cooperative, it's what the word means. It means to cooperate, and if they choose to, yes, we're going to still cooperate, then we would be forced to stay and still be paying the higher percentage.
Are there other corporations in their own CTE district?
Correct, yes. So most recently, Whitco did something similar. Last year, Hamilton Southeastern did something. And a few years ago, Greater Lafayette, they also established one.
If we were so far away from everything, would it make a difference in our decision? You know, so we're so far from other schools, we can't take advantage of their offerings. Does that play as big a part as it seems? Because it seems like we can't really get as much bang for our buck here.
Right. Well, and I would say too, because we have such strong programming here, there isn't anything necessarily that we would send to that they currently have. Like when we look at the programs that go to Heartland, those aren't offered in Area 18. They're culinary is at Bluffton, but like diesel, like that's not one that's offered. You know, things like that.
Would we benefit if they could come to us? Because we're closer. I guess what I'm going at. I don't see any reason to stay in this area. I mean, not in where our location is so disconnected.
Yeah. Previously in the past, Norwell would send students here, usually for social work and EMT, but they have chosen to start some of their own programs because what you see is when it's offered locally, you have higher enrollment. So that's why they quit sending here. It wasn't that there was an issue, it's just they started their own health services program.
Other questions for Tiffany or Joe? So Joe, to summarize, for this to occur for 25-26, board would have to take action of their intent, then you would send that letter, and then that would have to be acted on in the June meeting by the 9 superintendents, the co-op, if you will, right?
Yeah, it's not a notice that we're withdrawing, it's a notice that, a request to withdraw is what the agreement says, that we would like to withdraw. So it is, although Mr. Trout's, I think, confident that this has been discussed, this is not going to come as news to the other corporations. I believe Tiffany has indicated that too, that they won't open their email and say, well, what do you mean, honey? I think it's, if you ask them all, they know that this is probably on its way, but we do, technically it's a request to withdraw. It's someone like the conference affiliations in athletics that they have cooperative agreements and they don't just necessarily let schools move in and out arbitrarily, that they do have rules, and joining anew, it takes certain votes. Now this is obviously in cooperative and technical education, and so I think Tim's point about proximity does make some sense, and making use of our learning center facility, which is second to none.
One thing that I can share locally, I've had the privilege of working with 5 superintendents in Huntington, 3 and soon to be 4 business managers. Every single one has asked me why we're part of the cooperative. Like that's usually in one of our first meetings. They're like, what's this Area 18 and why do we do this? Why are we giving them money and what is the benefit and the costs? And then I share, you know, the facts that I presented to you today. So I know it's something that's been kind of in our minds for a while.
This last agreement was signed in May of 2010. So we're 14, 15 years into the last cooperative agreement.
Any further questions? Well, I want to thank Mr. Wiley and Principal Drummond. You guys have done a lot of work on this, and I know Mr. Trout will be bringing this forward at one point for board for discussion and possibly acting. It'll be up to you. So thank you both for being here tonight.
Thank you. And I won't touch the clicker anymore.
Mr. McLaughlin, we're not going to take a 7th inning stretch. We're just going to push on. Okay, so I appreciate you being here tonight. Talk a little bit about virtual education, the IU, the APEX program, any questions the board might have. But if you could start out a little bit about our IU virtual education program that you're going to bring forward at some point for approval.
Sure. We began looking at a virtual option that provided some rigor to maybe attract some students that weren't currently in our district, maybe that were in a homeschool setting or something outside of Huntington County. There are several online organizations out there that are nowhere close to Huntington County that our kids go to, and they receive those ADM dollars for those students, and we felt like we could provide an option for those kids that would be both rigorous and a little bit more user-friendly than possibly what they are currently experiencing. So we were tasked with looking at some options, and one of those options is one of the oldest online high school programs in the country, and that is the IU Online High School. They were founded in 1925. Obviously, we weren't online in 1925.
Were you, Mr. Peters, that no knowledge? Okay.
First student? No? All right. So they would, it was a distance education program where they would mail you your textbook and your coursework and all of those kind of things. It was time for a test. You'd have to wait for the postman to come to your house, drop it off, you put a stamp on it, send it back, all those kinds of things. So they've been around for a long time, obviously not in the online variety. So that was kind of the task that we were, let's see if I can work this any better than Tiffany did. Apparently the answer is no. So, yep, so the process will be that there would be an application to make sure that the students that are enrolling in this program have a high success rate. We do have a program now that we use for credit recovery, which is the Apex online program. This would definitely be a bit more rigorous than what we currently have for the Apex. So we would want to make sure that the students that are enrolling in this program have a history and a track record of doing well in an online setting, whether they're coming to us from another online school outside of Huntington or some other venue, that there's some proof that they're going to do this work at home if it's assigned or if they're enrolled in the program. So that is the difference between the current program that we have with Apex, where they're recovering credits from possibly something that they've not had success in school, to this program. And the other difference is that there is a per course cost associated with this program compared to the Apex. So thank you, Mrs. Gray. So this is a little bit more history about IU Online. It's ranked #1 in terms of the online high schools in the United States, and top 4 with national reputation. So there are AP courses, dual credit courses, all those kinds of things that they can receive here in person, that they can receive through the IU Online High School. There are a lot of other programs out there, but a lot of them don't offer those same options, particularly of the AP and the college prep courses or the dual credit classes. So it is a good program from that standpoint with the rigor and options that they have. So we do have one student currently that we have allowed to try this as a trial run to see how this will go. It was a very easy enrollment process. Our guidance counselors spent about 20 minutes with IU Online high school personnel to do that, and it was very easy. They can start the course at any time, so it doesn't have to roll with our semester, our quarter breaks or anything like that. We can enroll a student at any time. So depending on the situation, if a student moves here from out of district mid-semester or something along those lines, and it's not a great fit to try and slide them into the building at that point, we could do a student like that. Or if there's a change, sometimes we may have some health issues with a student where maybe they can't be in the building all the time. We could start them in this procedure, this process as well. It is asynchronous, so I'm sure the board is well versed in synchronous versus asynchronous and all of those discussions. So it is without a direct instruction. It is students learning on their own. The difference between this and, for say, our Apex courses, which are also asynchronous, is there is a teacher assigned to each class that's taught through IU Online High School. So those teachers are licensed Indiana teachers, and they work in a brick and mortar school during the day. So they would have office hours after school for those students that are doing IU Online, for them to be able to say, I don't really understand question number 5 in the homework, or I didn't understand this concept, and then they can have a Zoom call or something like that with that teacher. So they do have access to that teacher, but that teacher is not specifically online live with them, talking to them about a topic, okay, unless they request it. The good news is the program is delivered through the learning management system Canvas, or what they call the LMS, which is what our students currently use. So our students are familiar with Canvas, and they would know how to navigate the platform. So there wouldn't be any change there. They are given 180 days to complete the course. Obviously, that's longer than a semester, but there's a very generous timeline. We would hope that students in this program would far exceed, not exceed, but beat that timeline in the reverse order, where they would get it done much quicker than the 6 months. But they're not going to get bumped out of a class at 90 days at the end of the semester if for some reason they didn't get it done. So they give them plenty of time to do that. They can take as many or as few courses at a time that they would like. And as soon as they get them done, they can be done. They don't have to extend it out over that 6 months either. So they can work at their own pace. The only drawback or negative to that, when we talked about that, is that there is I believe it's a 3 or 4 month or 4 week window that they can't complete the course any quicker than that, because of the teacher having to have time to grade things. So there was a minimum. You couldn't complete a course too quickly, but they said that that's not usually an issue. They offer all sorts of different courses, too numerous to mention online or on this PowerPoint, but there is a website that you can go to that's IU High School, and you can see all of the courses. But as I mentioned, they do AP courses, they do dual credit courses, they do honors courses, but they charge $291 per course, and typically a course is 1 semester. So for example, if you're taking English 12, there's an English 12A and an English 12B, so that would be $291 for A and $291 for B. Now you're asking, well, how does that help us if we're paying for these courses? Because then they are actually counted as a Huntington North student, because we are providing that as an online option through Huntington North. So we would receive their ADM money as an online student, which is 85% of the ADM is more. So 85% of the ADM for that student, and then about half of that would go out in tuition, so we would recoup the other half and have those students as enrolled students at Huntington North. So that's the advantage of this program versus some others, even though there is a cost. There are also textbooks that are associated with some of the courses. With the new textbook rental agreement with the State of Education, those would be our responsibility to provide those curricular materials to the students, but then we would receive those back at the end of the course, and then hopefully develop a library that as students took other courses, we would have copies of those books that we would loan them to complete the courses. So that's the IU Online High School in a nutshell.
Questions for Mr. McLaughlin?
So is this a all in or all out, or can they be enrolled in the high school and take, say, I want to take Spanish, just to try and get ahead for college and stuff, get that out of the way?
Yeah, so we could do any number of things, but there may be courses that we don't offer that they might be able to take through this, that particularly as you mentioned Spanish, but in world languages, our world language options are very limited currently here. So that's a possibility. For some other reasons, depending on family situations or whatever, maybe a half day in person and a half day at IU Online for various different reasons, but all of those would be options that we could look at.
How many current offerings are just through Apex?
That's correct.
Okay. How many students do we currently have that are taking some sort of online class?
That number is about 200 in the high school. There are some at the middle school as well. Most of those are either credit recovery, or they are students that are not in this building for disciplinary reasons, and that's their avenue for receiving their education at that time.
And I apologize. I was going to send you a list of questions. I want it to be. I'm going to ask a lot, and if you say, "Hey, I got to think about that one or get back to you," I understand, because I was going to try and get you my list beforehand, and
Yes, sir.
I failed. So, so are we going to keep the credit recovery portion of this, and then this is in addition to?
That is my understanding, because they serve two different purposes, really. The IU Online, I would look at it as more of a alternate way to receive your high school education, where the Apex was originally designed for students that failed and needed to retake a class. So that is still going to remain in place for that purpose. Where this is, we're hoping to attract some students to Huntington schools to become students of ours through this program and receive a quality education that they might be doing at some other online institution now.
So what, the $291 per course, do we pay that, or does the student pay that?
We would pay that portion for any course that was taken.
And then what sort of oversight do we have here to make sure that they're following through with what they're signed up for?
Sure. So that would be one why we would have a screening process or an application process to show past history of academic performance, either through a brick and mortar school or through another online program somewhere else. And we would have to determine, based on that information, if they would be a good fit for this program. So it would not be a program that everyone would get into.
And then the rigor, you and I have talked about the rigor of the current setup that we have. Like when you're doing Apex, I mean, I've heard stories of students like, oh, I finished my Apex class in 6 weeks, and then they're done with those classes for the rest of the semester. So, like on Apex, how are they tested to make sure that they've mastered the materials, or at least have some understanding of the materials?
So there are midterm assessments, and there are also final exams in each Apex course, and they have to get permission to unlock those 2 exams from a proctor here at Huntington North, which is Mr. Burnworth at the Learning Center across the street, to show that they're ready for that. And then there are thresholds that we set in Apex on what that percentage has to be for them to pass that exam and move on to another part of the course or to another course in general.
So on the Apex, do you take periodic tests during it, and then you take the end one? So are you getting grades all along just like a traditional student does, and then those are reported for athletic or extracurricular purposes?
That's correct. So there are, I think they call them quizzes at the end of each unit, and then there's a midpoint test, and then more quizzes than an end test. So I couldn't give you an exact number of assignments or quizzes that they have to take, but yes, there are some written assignments as a part of Apex. There are some, depending on the course, there could be some type of project that they have to complete as well. But then there are quizzes and tests along the way. And so in Apex, it shows you 2 grades when you look up a student's grade in Apex. It shows you their current grade based on the work that they've completed, and then it shows you their grade and how far they've progressed through the course. So it will say 85%, 19% through the course. And then it also shows you that if they did nothing else after that 19%, what their grade would become, because everything else would turn into zeros. So, and I forget the exact terminology because all the programs are different, but one is current grade and one is performance grade or something like that. So yes, so for athletic purposes, when we check grades at the end of the quarter, so either second quarter or third quarter, they have to have been completed at least 50% of the coursework and have a 60% or better at that time for it to count as a passing grade to be eligible for extracurriculars.
And then how would the IU one work? Is it similarly structured? And when you take a test on Apex or on this IU, is it on the computer and is it locked so you can't get to outside resources while you're taking the exam?
Right. So currently with Apex, no. They keep telling us that they are building that platform. So that is an issue with Apex in terms of integrity with those courses. IU, there is a platform that they have to register with. So they can either come into the school and be proctored here for IU Online, or they register, and I apologize, I cannot remember the name of the test program, but they have to sign up through this program, and I'm going to take it at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, and then they take their phone and show them the room and all that stuff, you know, how they do that. So there is a platform for IU Online for test security and integrity.
Okay. And then what's to say, I'm pulling out an example here, that nobody likes teacher X that teaches government at Huntington North. And so we have so many students sign up for online through IU that then we don't need a teacher for that class. What's to safeguard against that kind of messing up our numbers?
Yeah, so the premise behind this was to attract students that aren't currently at Huntington North to our district, and that's our hope. So as we develop the enrollment process and packet, which we have not done yet because it's not an approved program through the school board, we would set those expectations and limits on who could enroll and what percentage they had to be enrolled to be a part of this program. So that would be something that I would say would be addressed later.
How many classes do they have to take to qualify for the ADM count? Just one? So if they were not a member of Huntington North, they take one class, do they then qualify to get the 85% of the?
Right, it's proportionate to the number of classes that they're enrolled in, Mrs. Moore?
Can you repeat the question?
So like if they enroll in one, like if they just came for band here, but they were homeschooled the rest of the time, we get 1/7 of the ADM approximately, or?
Correct, and I believe, did we just put into requirements, or that was more on the athletic side of like
I guess what I'm wondering is
courses.
if we get a slice of, if we get them to take a class through this, or a few classes, it's proportionate to till they reach like a full slate of classes.
It's proportionate to the enrollment. So if they're enrolled for 1/7, then we get a portion of that for that.
So it's not just one class, but it's X amount of classes equal full.
Correct.
Like if a student took one class, what's our ADM per student
Our
ballpark?
it is for fiscal year 25 coming up as of July 1, 6681.
So let's say it's 7,000. They take one class, we get $1,000, but we're paying 600. Is that
Right.
If they took a full year, right, yeah.
And that's
textbooks?
in the the virtual, that's the non-virtual. So if they were,
Maybe
because you've got
85% of that.
85%, correct. So which did go up $75 in comparison next year in comparison to this year, but it is a proportion of that.
Okay.
So there may be a minimum that we have to have them take.
Right. And schools can set up expectations. Some of them that we've researched also have very clear things on if you're in their online academy, that doesn't figure into the Val-Sal and the GPA. There's lots of different things that high schools have done based on their desire for this program. Who is it for? Who is it benefiting? Does it help or hurt financially? And then who is allowed to apply? And so he would bring those forward, the parameters of it. Tonight was really, great questions, but to begin to show you where we're at, looking at it. We do have a student who's doing it, and we're monitoring how that's going. She's been a homeschool student in the past, correct, Mr. Clough?
Yes.
And to bring forward different options in different buckets. And I'm going to keep saying, highly successful high schools in our country have multiple options and multiple buckets for multiple kids on where they're at. So why has the Success Academy been a tremendous success in terms of our kids? Well, programming based on alternative education has to be different than our regular education. This particular plan that you're hearing from Principal McLaughlin is also a different bucket for a different kid at a different place. And so our goal is to be progressive in our educational approach with high standards in all of those buckets. This is just another prong to bring for your consideration in the future. And I know Mr. Trout has asked us to really do our research and bring forward some options or an option. And I want to thank Lynn Brown and Pat and the team at the high school for a lot of meetings to kind of go through different options. And this one stood out as possibly one for you to consider. Other questions for Pat or for the group? A wonderful job tonight, Pat. And Lynn, thank you for all the work you did. Appreciate all of those things. And he'll bring this forward again after we've had some time to think about it with a lot more specifics to it. But I think a really good start for some different options, Pat.
Thank you.
Thank you. President Roth, any final things from a board perspective on tonight's work session?
No, sir.
Wait a minute, official time. Hey, we're pretty close, right on the button. So thank you all for your attendance tonight. I appreciate it, and have a wonderful evening.